What if the isolation you feel isn't a social failure, but a biological tax on the complexity of your own internal architecture? We are taught that high intelligence is the ultimate social key that should unlock every door to influence and human connection. In reality, a highly tuned mind often acts as a barrier that prevents the individual from merging with the collective group safely. The very clarity you possess is a hidden trap that makes the normal world look like a blurred and distorted hall of mirrors. By the end of this deep dive, you will understand why your wisdom feels like a prison and your insight feels like exile. You are about to see the cold, mechanical reasons why society is built for the average and never for the exceptional mind. You believe that your feeling of being an outsider, a psychological wound that needs to be healed through better communication. You look at the ease with which others interact and assume that you are simply missing a specific piece of social software. The truth is much more mechanical because your brain is biologically incapable of ignoring the patterns that most people never even see. High intelligence is essentially a high-frequency antenna that picks up the background static of human contradiction and the many social lies. Where others see a simple conversation, you see the subtle power plays, the hidden insecurities, and the layers of performative social theater. This constant stream of data is a survival instinct that has become overstimulated in a world built on simple, comforting social myths. The average person survives by blending into the herd, which requires a specific and necessary level of blissful, uncritical social blindness. If you can see the cliff that the herd is running toward, you cannot join the stampede with any genuine sense of enthusiasm. Your intelligence is not a gift in this scenario. It is a weight that makes it impossible to move as fast as the crowd. We evolved to follow the group because the group provided physical protection from the many dangers of the ancient and wild world. But when the group's shared reality becomes a series of hollow rituals and empty slogans, the intelligent mind begins to naturally detach. Sigmund Freud suggested that civilization requires a certain amount of repression and a denial of our true, darker human nature to function. The intelligent person finds it increasingly difficult to participate in this collective repression because their mind is built to find the truth. You find yourself at a party or a meeting, listening to the small talk, and feeling a profound sense of existential dread. It is not that you are better than them, but that you are literally processing a different reality than the one they inhabit. Think of a person trying to watch a movie while seeing the cameras, the lights, and the bored actors waiting for their cues. The magic of the social experience is ruined by your ability to see the mechanics that are happening behind the colorful curtain. This creates a permanent state of hyper-awareness that is both mentally exhausting and deeply isolating for the individual in the long term. You start to realize that most human connection is based on a shared agreement to never mention the obvious and uncomfortable truths. Because you cannot keep that agreement, you become a source of silent tension in every room that you choose to enter. The group senses your observation and responds with a subtle, instinctual coldness that further pushes you toward the dark social edges. This is the hidden trap of the gifted mind. The more you understand the world, the less you can actually live within it. You are witnessing the slow domestication of the human species, where the most alert individuals are the first to be socially marginalized. Society does not want your deep insights. It wants your total compliance with the narrative that keeps the system moving forward today. Most people will tell you to just relax or stop overthinking, but they are simply asking you to turn off your brain. They want you to live in the dark with them because your light makes the cracks in their reality too visible to ignore. This is the only place where we do not ask you to dim your mind for the comfort of the fearful masses. Join those who seek the uncomfortable truth and decide to stop apologizing for your clarity by clicking the subscribe button now. The next layer explores why your search for genuine meaning is actually viewed as a threat to the stability of the group. We will look at the low-resolution world and why the system is designed to keep you intellectually hungry and permanently alone. Why does the world punish those who see too much? The answer is etched into the very foundation of our social survival. The modern world is constructed using a low-resolution map designed to be navigated by the largest possible number of people at once. You feel disconnected because you are trying to use a high-definition lens to read a script that was written in thick, blurry crayon. Society functions on generalizations, stereotypes, and simplified narratives that allow the gears of the economy and politics to turn without much friction. For the intelligent mind, these simplifications are not just annoying. They are a form of cognitive dissonance that feels physically and mentally painful. You see the complexity, the nuances, and the contradictions that make the official version of reality look like a shallow and hollow lie. When you try to point out these complexities, the group reacts with a strange, defensive hostility that feels like a personal rejection of you. They are not rejecting your facts. They are protecting the low-resolution map that allows them to feel safe and certain in their daily lives. Abraham Maslow observed that the need for safety is more fundamental than the need for truth for the vast majority of the human species. If your intelligence threatens that sense of safety by introducing complexity, you are viewed as a biological hazard to the collective peace of mind. The survival instinct of the group is to simplify the environment until it is manageable, even if that simplification requires a total denial of reality. You find yourself in a workplace where the most efficient solution is ignored in favor of a traditional ritual that makes everyone feel busy. You realize that the meetings are not about solving problems, but about reinforcing the status of the people at the top of the pyramid. To participate, you must pretend that the low-resolution version of the world is the only one that exists, which is a form of self-erasure. This creates a split in your psyche, the observant self that sees the truth, and the social self that performs the necessary, expected lie. The energy required to maintain this mask is immense, leading to a state of chronic, quiet exhaustion that most people mistake for simple depression. It is not depression, it is the natural fatigue of a high-performance engine being forced to idle at a walking pace for years on end. Think of an elite athlete being forced to play a game of catch with toddlers for the rest of their professional and personal life. The disconnection you feel is the distance between what you are capable of seeing and what the world is willing to let you speak. We evolved to share information that increases the survival of the tribe, but modern information is designed to increase the control of the system. The intelligent person is a noise in this system because they cannot be easily categorized or predicted by the standard, simple social algorithms. Your lack of predictability makes you a liability in a society that values the smooth, uninterrupted flow of consumption and of mindless social labor. You are witnessing the great leveling, where the peaks of human thought are being ground down to fill the valleys of the common denominator. The isolation you feel is the physical sensation of standing on a mountain peak, while everyone else is living in the foggy, crowded valley. You cannot bring them up to your level, and you cannot go down to theirs without losing the very essence of who you actually are. This realization is a micro cliffhanger of the soul. You are faced with the choice between a lonely clarity or a crowded, comfortable blindness. Most choose the blindness, but the very fact that you are still listening means that your mind has already made its final, jagged choice. You are beginning to see that the world doesn't hate your intelligence. It simply has no place to put it in the current social architecture. The next layer will explore the empathy of the observer and why your deep understanding of others actually makes it harder to love them. We will look at the terrifying reality of seeing through the people you care about and the cold compassion that results from total insight. Why does knowing the why behind human behavior make you feel like a ghost in your own life? The descent into the heart is next. We are told that to understand all is to forgive all, and that deep insight should lead to deeper and more meaningful human connections. You believe that if you could just explain the mechanics of the world to others, they would finally see the beauty and the truth. In reality, the more you understand the underlying machinery of human behavior, the more the magic of personality begins to dissolve into cold biological data. High intelligence allows you to see the why behind every smile, every argument, and every desperate bid for attention that people around you make. You see the childhood trauma driving the boss's aggression, and you see the deep-seated insecurity fueling your friend's constant and exhausting need for praise. Where others feel a spark of spontaneous connection, you feel the click of a gear shifting in a predictable and very ancient psychological machine. This is the observer's curse, a state where people cease to be mysterious individuals and become transparent collections of survival-driven reflexes and social scripts. It is difficult to fall in love with a melody when you can see the mathematical equations and the mechanical vibrations that are producing the sound. This creates a form of cold compassion, where you feel for the suffering of others, but can no longer participate in their emotional theater. You understand their pain better than they do, but that very understanding creates a glass wall that prevents you from feeling it with them. Carl Jung spoke of the danger of unearned wisdom, but for the intelligent, the wisdom is often earned through a lifetime of involuntary and constant observation. You realize that most people are not living their lives. They are being lived by their impulses, their shadows, and their unexamined social conditioning. Think of a doctor who can only see the skeleton and the organs while everyone else is admiring the beauty of the person's smooth skin. The doctor cannot unsee the anatomy, just as you cannot unsee the raw, primitive ego that is operating beneath the surface of polite society. This level of insight makes traditional social bonding feel like a shallow game of pretend that you are no longer able to play convincingly. You find yourself staying silent during social gatherings because to speak the truth would be to perform a psychological autopsy on everyone in the room. The group senses this detached, clinical gaze, and they label you as cold, arrogant, or judgmental to protect their own fragile sense of mystery. They need to believe that their choices are free and their emotions are unique, rather than being the predictable results of a universal human biology. Your presence is a reminder that the hidden self is not as hidden as they would like to believe, which makes you a social pariah. We evolved to value the unseen because it allowed for the creation of myths, religions, and the shared fantasies that bind a tribe together. By seeing through the myth, you have inadvertently removed yourself from the tribal bond that relies on a collective agreement to stay ignorant. You are a ghost in the machine, watching the other parts move in their pre-programmed loops while you stand perfectly still in the silent center. This is why intelligent people often prefer the company of books, animals, or the vacuum of their own thoughts over the company of real people. A book does not pretend to be something it isn't, and an animal does not hide its predatory nature behind a screen of moral virtue. You are beginning to realize that your disconnection is not a lack of empathy, but an excess of clarity that the human heart cannot handle. The realization is a cold shiver. You have traded the warmth of the crowd for the ice-cold precision of a lens that never blurs. You are standing in a room full of people, yet you are the only one who is actually in the room alone with the truth. The next layer explores the biological mismatch and why the modern world is a sensory and intellectual prison for a high-functioning nervous system. We will look at the noise of modern life and why your brain is literally vibrating at a frequency that the world wants to mute. Why does the modern environment feel like a constant attack on your sanity? The answer is hidden in the wiring of your very cells. We assume that intelligence is a purely mental trait that exists in a vacuum, separate from our physical bodies and our sensory nerves. You believe your exhaustion is purely emotional or social, a result of the frustrations that come from dealing with a world that moves too slow. The truth is that high intelligence is often a side effect of a highly sensitive nervous system that processes more data per second than normal. This means you are not just thinking more than others. You are literally feeling more of the world's raw and unfiltered physical and digital input. In our ancestral past, this hypersensitivity was a survival advantage that allowed the scout of the tribe to detect the predator before anyone else. Today, there is no predator to find, but the environment is saturated with a level of artificial noise and light that your brain cannot ignore. Modern society is built on a frequency of constant, low-quality stimulation that is designed to keep the average person occupied and distracted from the void. For the intelligent mind, this background noise of commercialism, loud music, and bright screens is a relentless physical assault on your very sanity and peace. What the group calls fun, or entertainment, your nervous system registers as a chaotic and meaningless overload of information that needs to be filtered out. You find yourself physically drained after a day in a shopping mall or an open-plan office, not because of the work, but the environment. The average person has a filter that allows them to tune out the flickering lights, the distant chatter, and the hum of the air conditioning. Your filter is thinner, or perhaps non-existent, because your brain is wired to find the pattern and the meaning in every single bit of data. Psychologist Kazimierz Dabrowski called this overexcitability, a state where the individual is fundamentally more reactive to the world around them in every possible way. This sensitivity makes the modern world feel like a prison where the walls are made of static and the air is filled with empty, screaming voices. Think of a fine-tuned musical instrument being played in the middle of a construction site. The result is not music, but a painful, jarring discord. You withdraw into solitude not because you hate people, but because your nervous system is desperately trying to recalibrate in the only quiet it can find. The group views your need for isolation as a sign of weakness or disorder that needs to be medicated or corrected by social exposure. They do not understand that for you, exposure is a form of sensory torture that degrades your ability to think, to create, and to exist. We have built a civilization that values the extroverted ideal, a way of living that rewards those who can thrive in loud, high energy, and shallow environments. The intelligent person is a biological mismatch for this era, a creature evolved for the deep silence of the forest or the focused intensity of the hunt. You are being forced to live in a low-frequency world that demands you lower your own internal vibration just to fit through the narrow social door. This creates a permanent state of existential friction, where every movement you make against the grain of society produces a spark of heat and pain. You start to feel like a stranger in your own species, wondering why everyone else seems so comfortable in a world that feels like an attack. The system wants you to believe that your sensitivity is a flaw, because a sensitive person is harder to control and much harder to satisfy. You are realizing that the disconnection you feel is actually a healthy biological rejection of a toxic and overstimulated modern habitat that we have created. The cliffhanger here is the realization that your body is telling you what your mind has already suspected. You do not belong in this specific century. You are a relic of a different kind of human, one that was built for depth and for silence, now drowning in a shallow and loud sea. The final layer will reveal the sovereignty of the void and the price you must pay to truly own your own mind in the end. We will look at the ultimate truth of the intelligent outsider, the realization that the disconnection is not a problem, but your final and only defense. What happens when you stop trying to bridge the gap and finally let the bridge burn? The truth is waiting in the silent, cold dark. The final realization is the most difficult to accept because it requires the total abandonment of the hope that you will one day be understood. You have spent your life looking for a tribe, a partner, or a social circle that would finally speak your language and see your internal world. The truth is that for a mind of a certain complexity, the bridge to the collective is not just broken. It was never biologically intended to exist. You must stop viewing your isolation, a temporary waiting room for a better life, and start seeing it as your permanent and final destination. High intelligence is the ultimate form of self-contained sovereignty, a state where the individual becomes their own sun, their own law, and their own judge. The price of this total mental freedom is the permanent loss of the warmth and the safety that comes from being part of the herd. You are no longer a passenger on the ship of society. You are a lone swimmer in a vast, dark ocean that has no visible shore or rescue. This is the sovereignty of the void, a state of being where you finally stop asking the world for permission to see what you already see. Friedrich Nietzsche spoke of the loneliness of the heights, noting that the higher a man rises, the more solitary he becomes in his own spirit. He realized that the air at the top is too thin for those who need the heavy, humid oxygen of constant social validation and common groupthink. You have been trying to breathe that heavy air for too long, and it has been slowly suffocating the very genius that makes you a unique human. Think of a person who finally stops shouting into a canyon and realizes that the echo of their own voice is the only answer they will ever get. When you stop trying to bridge the gap, the friction that has been draining your life force finally begins to cool and then slowly disappears. You realize that the disconnection was never a problem to be solved, but a protective moat that kept the mediocrity of the world at a distance. The system wants you to feel broken because a broken person is desperate to be fixed by the hollow promises of the consumerist and social machine. But a person who accepts their exile is the only person who is truly dangerous to a society built on the management of a predictable, average mass. You no longer care about the status games, the moral theater, or the low-resolution stories that keep the rest of the world in a state of sleep. This is the quiet end of your long struggle, the realization that you are not a misfit in their world, but the architect of your own. The people you once craved connection with now look like distant figures moving in a fog that you have finally stepped out of for good. There is a profound, cold peace in this realization that no normal social interaction could ever provide for a mind as complex as yours. You are the only person who can truly inhabit the space you have built, and that is not a tragedy. It is the ultimate human achievement. This channel, the only place where we do not try to integrate you back into the very system that is trying to mute your soul. We provide the mirror for those who are ready to stop looking for a home in a world that was never built to house them. Click the subscribe button now to join the few who have stopped running from the void and have started to finally build within it. The decision to be alone with the truth is the most terrifying and the most rewarding choice a human being can ever make in their life. You are now standing at the edge of the world, watching the lights of the civilization you have left behind flicker and then slowly fade into gray. The silence that follows is not empty. It is the sound of a mind that has finally stopped fighting its own nature and its own clarity. Look at the world one last time and realize that you were never disconnected from it. You were simply the only one who was ever actually awake. The descent is finished, and you are now the master of a kingdom of one, where the truth is the only thing that actually remains. Stop living in the dark with those who fear the heights, and finally accept the cold, beautiful clarity of your own and final intellectual exile.